Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank each of the witnesses for appearing here today, and I'd like to start with you, Mr. Jones. Your description of the loss of your brother Gordon brings back painful memories about the loss of my brother back in 1978 from a drilling accident. And so my heart has a natural empathy with you, and so I am sorry for what's happened to your family. And I think it does reinforce the importance of having strong, sound safety regulations in this business, and that everybody that participates in this business use those regulations. I think the Oil Spill Commission report, it started out by saying that there were a few bad actors in the Gulf of Mexico. But then it unfairly went on and painted the rest of the industry with a broad brush that said we had systemic industry-wide problems. I don't know what I can do, but I'll see if I can get BP to give you a call because they owe that to you. Now, I'd like to go on. Ms. Randolph and Mr. Chasen, I'm sorry for what's happened to your communities. As a person who used to operate across the Louisiana Gulf Coast and had a district headquarters in Morgan City, operated in Terrebonne and St. Mary and Lafourche Parish, I know what's happening to y'all. Mr. Jaberga, did I get that right?
Sure did. Thank you.
I have a question for you. You were trying to respond to Mr. Markey's comments about, and I think the two of you were too, about the fact that there's been an allegation that nothing's changed. There have been no new regulations. But as I understand, there have been a fair number of notices to leaseholders, NTLs as they're called in the business. Why don't you walk through what the real story is here in terms of improved safety responsiveness?
Thank you, Congressman. There have been a number of recommendations that were issued early on following the disaster. Many of those were implemented as interim regulations and then final regulations, and the industry has engaged, I think, in an unprecedented attempt in order to not only try to understand these regulations, many of which were extremely complex, but do everything it could to immediately come into compliance with them. Our contention,
try to keep it short, so I appreciate that. I mean, the point I was trying to get to is that the allegation there's been no change in safety standards in the Gulf of Mexico is patently false. Is that correct?
Well, it's absolutely false, sir.
Okay. That's what I thought.
If it were true, then I have no idea what the BOEM has been doing for the last several months.
They've
been
issued
doing nothing but
hundreds of pages of new regulations on the Gulf of Mexico, and supposedly after all these regulations were issued and the moratorium was lifted, people began to comply with the new permitting process, and they have begun to comply with that new permitting process. However, very few permits are being issued. In the last you have your company has sued the federal government, and you have, the judge has found the Secretary of Interior to be in contempt of court because of a deliberate slowdown in the issue of permits. Tell us what your perspective is on what's really happening. Commissioner Jones of the Texas Railroad Commission a few minutes ago talked about the fact that there are allegations that nobody wants to drill in the Gulf of Mexico anymore, that there are no permits, that there are slow down the number of permits that are being requested. Why don't you tell us what's really happening from your perspective?
Well, from our perspective, and of course we're in the supply industry side of this, so we support offshore drilling efforts. From our perspective, what we're seeing is a drastic reduction in activity on the OCS, even though there was no moratorium that was ever issued in the shallow water, for instance. There has been a radical reduction in shallow water activity. Well, if there was no moratorium in the shallow water, where did all that activity go?
Right.
It's been bottled up in a bureaucratic morass that has prevented those activities from advancing, even though
I think we're getting your point. So I've got one more question I need to ask. Mr. Overton, your industry has been adversely impacted by the spill. What will the impact of $4 or $4.50 gasoline prices add to the pain that you're currently feeling?
Oh, there's no question that we don't want that either. And it's a tough situation for us to be in because clearly our visitors that come to Florida by vehicle and even through the cost of an airline ticket will be impacted by oil prices. But I would tell you that I don't think it's nearly as significant as the losses we've sustained over the past, 9 months now, 8 months now. So we don't want either. We don't want the loss to occur as a result of the oil spill, and we want gas prices to be low. And we're not against offshore oil drilling. Our industry is not against becoming interdependent from foreign oil. We want that, but we also want to do it in a way that it makes sense to the commerce of Florida.
Mm-hmm. Again, I want to thank each of you, and Mr. Jones, again, you have my condolences for your entire family.
Time of the gentleman has expired.